Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the webinar today. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us. My name is Rebecca Harvey, and I'm the Sustainability Coordinator for the City of Boynton Beach. Today, we're going to present the results of our urban tree canopy assessment that the city has contracted with the Green Infrastructure Center to conduct this project for us. And we also have on the video today, we have Karen Firehawk and Matt Lee from the Green Infrastructure Center, and they will be presenting shortly on the results of the assessment. So just to start off on the same page, what tree canopy refers to is the layer of tree leaves, branches, and stems that provide coverage of the ground. When you're standing on the ground and look up, that's the canopy that you see above you. And an urban tree canopy assessment maps the amount of tree coverage that currently exists across the city, as well as the amount that could potentially exist by planting more trees. So this study allows us as a community to develop and prioritize goals for planting more trees in Boynton Beach. So after we present the results today and hear from you and have a chance to integrate some of the feedback we get today into the final project report, our aim is to present that report to City Commission for their approval on July 21st. And on that note, I have Mayor Stephen Grant on the webinar today, and we can unmute him. And Mayor Grant, say a few introductory words.
Hello, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
All right, thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. I want to appreciate everyone that is in attendance here, especially our sustainability coordinator Rebecca Harvey, and I'm glad that you're working with the Green Infrastructure Center. Trees are extremely important to me and to our society and to our environment. And Boynton Beach is doing what we can, as you can see with our Go Green initiative, to save as much of the trees as that we can. And one of the examples of the city saving trees is the Kapok Tree. It was a 80-year-old tree that was about over 40 feet high. That is one of those monstrous rainforest trees that provides a lot of canopy, and we were able to move that and save that with the help of our landscape architect. And that's kind of where we are moving forward, is that we know that it gets hot here in Florida, and being in the shade makes a huge difference. And so I want to thank the Green Infrastructure Center for helping us with our tree canopy, and so that we can learn more and fix and improve all the areas that we can to have additional tree canopy. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mayor Grant, for that introduction, and I hope you stick around. We will have plenty of time for some Q&A at the end to discuss more. So I wanted to just go over a few ground rules before we get started. Questions will be taken at the end of the webinar and can be made either verbally or by typing into the chat room. If you want to speak verbally during the Q&A period, you can raise your hand. You'll see a raise hand icon next to your name in the attendee list. You may also type your questions directly into the chat room anytime, and we will answer them at the end of the webinar. In this webinar, we will respond to questions that are directly related to the tree canopy assessment. If you have other city matters to discuss, please contact the appropriate city department. We will respond to each questioner one time. If you have additional questions and we run out of time to respond to all of them, you can always email them to me. And my email is harveyr, that's HARVEYR @bbfl.us. This webinar is being recorded, and a copy will be sent to all participants within 24 hours of the webinar's end. It will also be on the city's website. If anyone is being disruptive or posting inappropriate comments in the chat room, the moderators will exit that person from the webinar. Finally, a survey provided following the webinar will offer an additional opportunity to comment and will be available to the public for a full week following this presentation. So please do share with your friends and neighbors who weren't able to attend today. Okay, you can go to the next slide, Karen, or Matt. I don't see the slide change, but there it is. Okay, just took a second. Okay, so before I turn it over to the Green Infrastructure Center, I just have a few words of introduction. As the sustainability coordinator for the city, I'm very excited about this project because tree canopy, as many of you know, have so many benefits for our city and for our community. And because of the multiple benefits of trees, this assessment helps directly and indirectly address many of the goals of our city plans and initiative. And this is just a snapshot of the many goals that we have already in the city that in some way tree canopy will benefit these initiatives. Next slide, please. And most directly and most recently also is this assessment helps to implement our new climate action plan. The City Commission approved the updated 2020 Climate Action Plan just this March, and it serves as the guiding document for sustainability in the city of Boynton Beach. The Climate Action Plan establishes a goal of reducing citywide greenhouse gas emissions by 50% by the year 2035 and achieving net zero emissions by 2050. This target is in line with international standards and the best science that we have today. And one of the plan's central visions is to create a greener Boynton Beach by enhancing the tree canopy and native plant and wildlife communities. And specifically, urban forestry is included as a strategy in the Climate Action Plan because trees, as you know, capture carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and store it to help reduce the effects of global warming. The plan also highlights multiple co-benefits of greenhouse gas reduction. And in the case of tree canopy, it addresses all of these benefits, which are cost savings, economic development, public health, ecosystem protection, and climate resilience. And our consultants are going to tell us more details about those benefits. And I will take the final slide, please. So the last point that I want to make before I turn it over is that people in our community love trees. Especially now, I think during these challenging times and all of the bad news that we're surrounded by, planting trees is something positive we can do right now that tangibly helps improve our community. The city of Boynton Beach has been a Tree City USA for 35 years. We're very proud of that. So we've been walking the walk for a generation. We have recently, when developing the Climate Action Plan, identified urban forestry as one of the top priorities, both by the Sustainability Advisory Team, which is our core group of volunteers, as well as by the outreach that we did specifically for the Climate Action Plan. And we also have a number of prior successful events and partnerships that we're building on, such as our relationship with the Boynton Beach Garden Club, with Community Greening, our nonprofit that's won grants to support planting right now going on in the heart of Boynton neighborhood. We've worked with Cub Scouts and other groups. And so although you're going to hear today about the launch of our tree planting campaign, we're making it official, but it's something ongoing and it's been a priority of the city for quite a long time. And then the last point I want to make is that of social equity and inclusion. And we are talking a lot these days about racial justice, racial equality. And although trees don't always come up in those discussions, there is a connection because low-income neighborhoods and communities of color consistently have been found to have lower tree canopy. This is true throughout the United States. And so by targeting our tree planting campaign in the neighborhoods that need them the most, again, it gives us a way to do something positive that can increase equity in our community by ensuring that the benefits help to reduce the current disparities and historical disparities among our communities. So at that note, I'm going to turn it over to Karen and Matt from the Green Infrastructure Center, and they will take you through the canopy assessment and results. Remember, please, if you have questions, feel free to type them into the chat box or save them until the end. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rebecca. And with that, I'll take it from here. And then, as we said, we will all return to answer your questions at the end. We will be monitoring the chat throughout the conversation, though. So if you chat something in the next few minutes, we will still make sure to answer it at the end. So we are the consultants for the project. We responded to a competitive bid to get the opportunity to help map your trees. And we are a nonprofit organization. So we help communities evaluate their green assets, their natural assets, and manage them to maximize ecological, economic, and cultural benefits. So we do a lot of mapping and modeling. We work in wildlands all the way to downtowns, and we do a lot of strategic planning, writing, teaching, and training. If you'd like to know more about our work, you can visit our website, gicinc.org. So there are a lot of elements to this project. Uh, Obviously, we've mapped the tree canopy, and we're going to explain how we did that. Determining options for conservation or expansion. So where can we protect trees? Where can we plant more? Modeling the benefits. So figuring out the air quality benefits, the water quality benefits of having our trees, and then also goal setting. So we're very proud of the city of Boynton Beach because you guys have actually gotten to a goal, and that's what we're going to talk about today. So what is green infrastructure? We like to define that. It's easiest to do with a picture. So here on the left side of your screen, you'll see the gray infrastructure, and that is your roads, your sidewalks, your power lines, all of that sort of built infrastructure that makes civil society possible in Boynton Beach. But on the right-hand side is the tree canopy and all the shrubs, and that's what makes Boynton Beach livable because these plants are providing oxygen, they're cleaning particulate matter from the air, they're soaking up stormwater, they're providing shade, which we really need in the South, and of course, natural beauty for the city. So the definition of what is green infrastructure has expanded over time. It's actually a term that was coined by Florida in 1994 to describe the wetlands, rivers, dunes, and forest habitats of the state. And in 2006, EPA, the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, decided to call everything green infrastructure. So everything that uses natural structures or elements to clean rainwater. So things like rain gardens, permeable pavement, plants in drainage areas. But what we want to do is to first consider protecting the natural infrastructure, our trees, forests, and rivers, waterways, protect them and connect them, build in the least impactful manner with the smallest building footprint, and then mitigate the impacts. So first conservation and then mitigation. We really want to think about protecting the natural infrastructure of Boynton Beach first before we try to construct things. Because trees are the original green infrastructure. And the reason for that is not only was the term originally coined to refer to trees, but also trees really do a great job, better than anything that we can engineer. So estimates for the amount of water a typical tree can take up in its crown range anywhere from 760 gallons to 4,000 gallons of water per tree per year, depending on the species of the tree, how leafy it is, and how old it is, right? So how big it is. So all trees help capture water, but bigger trees do it the best. Trees also create healthy communities. Access to fitness. So it turns out people actually walk more and walk farther when they see trees. Trees also clean the air by absorbing volatile organic compounds from the air. They filter runoff, they cool the city, and they combat asthma. People actually have lower amounts of respiratory distress in well-treated neighborhoods. Well-being and mental health. People actually heal faster when they can see or access green. So some hospitals have started putting pictures of green things on their walls and making views of green and creating gardens, green rooftops, and other things. And less crime occurs near trees. And I think that's a really important statistic. So the greener the area, the lower the crime rate. This has been documented in multiple cities. And then also for employees, for worker bees, some of you may still be at work. You're more likely to exercise if you can get outside and access that trail close to your office. Job development. Trees actually help with jobs. Small companies that are well paid and have a skilled workforce place a strong importance on how green the local environment is. And the creative class, which is made up of artists, media, lawyers, analysts, they make up about 30% of the US workforce. And a lot of people's work is mobile these days. They're able to choose where they live. And they place a premium on outdoor recreation and nature access. So they tend to pick cities that they can go outside and take a walk. So when you have a green city, you also attract better paid jobs and thus a better tax base. And then canopy values, it turns out that people shop longer and spend about 12% more money per item in tree-lined shopping districts. So if you plant more street trees, people will actually contribute more to the economy. So figuring out how much canopy we have requires image classification. And that's a fancy way of saying we take satellite images of Boynton Beach, and then we actually use a computer to identify what those things are. So we might click on this cluster of trees over here, and we'll tell the computer that's a tree. We'll tell the computer this is the lawn. So it's sort of a smart technology, but after we do that enough times, the computer recognizes the infrared reflection and can now classify the entire image as to whether it's a tree or a building or impervious surface or bare earth or water. And why we need to know this is that helps us figure out exactly how much canopy we have, as well as how much impervious surface we have and open space where we might plant additional trees. And there are some challenges, of course, in mapping canopy in a subtropical environment, just like everywhere. Sometimes we have funny shaped trees. So here's a tree in someone's yard, and they've trimmed it in a beautiful way, but from space it might look to us like a hedge. But we need to, take a better look and realize, oh, that's a tree that somebody's cut in a funny shape. Mangroves, you have a lot of mangroves in Boynton Beach, especially in the downtown. And so we kind of consider those as wetlands, but for this study, we called them part of your canopy. And then there's also new development. So the aerial imagery we had originally was from 2019. And so trees could have been removed since pictures were taken from space. And then when you have trees right up against buildings, you have the potential for shadows to be cast. And sometimes that makes it look like there's more trees than are really there. So after we process the image, we have to do additional work to determine what's on the ground. And so all of these pictures are pictures we took when we visited Boynton Beach last. And then also we have what I call these very tall grasses. For those of you who might not know, a palm tree, even though it's called a tree because of its straight up structure for some palms, is actually a grass. And so while it adds to the canopy, it's not doing as good of a job at soaking up stormwater or providing shade. So that's just something to keep in mind as we go through this work. So now I'm going to turn it over to Matt Lee, who gets actually the most fun part of the presentation, which is to tell you the results we found for your canopy and also some of the ecosystem services.
Thank you, Karen. So on this slide here, we're looking at a pie chart of land cover in the city with the water class removed. You can see how we define tree canopy in the city with trees and mangroves, which act like a forested wetland. We excluded palms, which make up 1.2% because palm trees, like Karen mentioned, do not provide the same ecosystem services as trees. So this distinction is important when we calculated the benefits of the urban forest altogether. To be more accurate, we made sure palms were not included in those calculations. However, we wanted to capture palms as part of the urban forest for the city because they contribute cultural and aesthetic value. So you can see here, tree canopy became 14.9%, and when we added that 1.2% in for palms, it gave us a total canopy of 16.1%. In this slide here, you can see how Boynton Beach's land cover compares to other neighboring cities. Tree canopy is lower compared to West Palm Beach, for example, but is comparable in impervious surfaces and other vegetation cover. One thing to highlight here is Southern Palm Beach County was hit hard by hurricanes in the 2000s, which caused significant losses to the area's tree canopy, according to a study by American Forests. Boynton Beach also experienced some rapid annual urban growth over the last 2 years, which contributed to tree cover loss. This is the tree canopy divided out by the 3 watersheds that make up the city. You can see of the 3, Lake Osborne has the largest share of the tree canopy cover at 18%, while the Lake Ida watershed has the most pervious surfaces, which will be important later when we talk about plantable areas for putting trees. Karen mentioned earlier in the presentation some of the benefits trees provide. An important component of the project was to calculate the values trees provide in terms of ecosystem services. In this graphic on the left, it shows some general values different sizes of trees provide, with larger trees providing much greater values and services than smaller trees. Another thing to point out is the value of palms. As I mentioned earlier, palms do not provide the same ecosystem services that trees do. Their roots are much more shallow. They do not soak up as much stormwater. They cast less shade. And from the table on the right, you can see they actually cost more to maintain than they give back in terms of ecosystem services. So while palms can have a place in an urban landscape, when we think about the urban forest and the benefits it can provide to quality of life and the environment, we should be focused on increasing canopy cover for trees. And here's some of the many benefits urban forests provide. So capture stormwater runoff, air quality benefits, shade through reduced temperatures, carbon sequestration, aesthetics, community health, wildlife habitat, increased property values. The first benefit I'll be talking about is stormwater. In this graphic, you can see as forest cover is lost or converted to more urban development, this increases the amount of impervious surfaces, surfaces where rainfall cannot soak into the ground, but instead runs off across the surface into stormwater pipes or local waterways. As this water runs across surfaces, it can pick up trash, oils, pollution, and carry those things into waterways, which causes water quality to decline. Trees, on the other hand, intercept rainfall and help to infiltrate it into the soil through their root systems and transpire water back into the atmosphere. So trees contribute a lot to water quality by preventing runoff. So in this study here by Schall in 2000, 20% of annual rainfall or greater was retained in the crown, and runoff can often be delayed up to 3.7 hours, depending on the type of soils. These are graphs of the amount of pollution captured by trees from entering into the local waterways. You can see here the totals for nitrogen, phosphorus, and sediment. So there's almost 4,800 pounds per year of nitrogen that was captured by existing trees, about 380 pounds per year for phosphorus, and then this amount here for sediment. Here's a table for the removal rates, pounds per year for specific air quality pollutants. Trees prevent air pollution in various ways. For example, most ozone and nitrogen dioxide are generated through increased surface temperatures. For those pollutants, trees' shade is helpful in reducing those amounts from the environment. Other types of air pollution, like particulate matter, are captured on the surface of leaves so that they are not in the air where we can breathe them. More attention is being brought to air quality around the country with COVID-19 and how much respiratory illnesses are impacting community health. Trees are one way to reduce poor air quality in a city. Another component of this table shows the amount of carbon sequestered and stored in the tree canopy. Rebecca mentioned at the beginning of the presentation the Climate Action Plan and the goals for the city, which includes reduction in greenhouse gas emissions. Trees are an excellent element to include in any climate strategy for reducing emissions, and you can see that millions of pounds are sequestered annually. The map on the left shows the relatively hottest places in the city. So red or orange places are hotter than blue places. The graph on the right shows a positive correlation between impervious surfaces, which the black line represents, and an increase in surface temperature, which is the red line. As impervious surfaces increases, so does surface temperature. Conversely, as tree canopy cover decreases, surface temperature increases. With this chart, we can see that the hottest census block groups are the ones with the most impervious surfaces and the least amount of tree canopy cover on average. As part of our analysis of the city, we also looked into how well treated certain urban features are, such as streets, parks, and schools. We looked at these public spaces to understand how and where low canopy areas existed, and if any needs to be included in a tree planting campaign. This map shows how well treed are the streets of Boynton Beach. The red streets have particularly low cover canopy, and as you can see that several neighborhoods lack trees in the public right-of-way. Hot sidewalks and streets means folks are less likely to walk or bike in those neighborhoods, again tying back to the quality of life and community health. This is a map of schools and the amount of canopy found at those sites. Studies indicate that the presence of trees can increase thinking and learning for children. These sites could also be an excellent educational opportunities with kids helping to plant and care for trees. This map is a little harder to read on a PowerPoint, so I also included it as a table listing out from highest to lowest the canopy covers for public parks. Now, some park uses are not suited for high tree canopy cover, for instance, soccer fields or baseball diamonds. So keep that in mind when you're, if you see a park in this list with a low canopy cover value. However, even parks with sport uses or facilities that exclude trees, you can still find spaces to add more tree cover. So we know that tree canopy cover is across the city. We also examined how it was distributed by streets, parks, schools, and census block groups, to name a few. The other main analysis we performed was to locate possible planting areas, or what we call PPA, which are places where you could potentially plant a tree in the city, and there would be enough room for it to grow and thrive. You can see here how the PPA was broken out by watershed. This series of images shows how we came up with possible planting areas. In the upper left image, first we start off with an image of the landscape. We process the photo to figure out land cover types, tree canopy, pervious and impervious surfaces, water, parking lots, buildings, etc. Then we classify all of those pervious surfaces as possible planting areas after we've excluded incompatible land uses. So like I mentioned before, the soccer fields, golf courses, power lines, cemeteries, etc. And then we drop imaginary trees on the landscape, accounting for setbacks from buildings, sidewalks, roads, to see how many large and small trees we can fit. Here we define large trees as 40 feet in diameter at maturity, which is in 20 years, and small trees at 20 feet in diameter. We grow the trees out and we can generate a potential land cover for the area, so we know how much tree canopy the city could potentially have if it planted all of the possible planting areas. Here's an example of where there is pervious surfaces you can fit a tree, and that tree is placed for adding new tree canopy to the city. This gives the city an idea of where they can fit new and healthy tree canopy because it has the room it needs to grow. Here are some local examples of places where trees could be planted. And the city is planting and adding more tree canopy back, which is great. And we also want to point out that the city is also trying to reduce impervious surfaces by installing things like pervious pavers, pervious parking lots, and greening up business districts. And all of this analysis of work leads to setting a canopy goal. So the city worked through the data and some tools. GIC has helped them with setting canopy goals. The answer is yes to all of the above. The city plans to increase its canopy. So the city plans to increase tree canopy cover from 16.1% to 20% by 2035. A 4% increase citywide, which requires planting about 45,000 trees or 3,000 trees per year over 15 years. City of Boynton Beach plans to cover about 50% of the costs of the tree planting campaign. The other 50% needs to be met with private residents, developers, grants, and corporate sponsorships. The city is working to develop a tree planting campaign with community partners. And we will build local capacity and encourage residents to plant trees on private property. And with the Canopy goal in mind, it is critical that the city partner with organization and residents to achieve its goal. For most localities, 70 to 80% of the land in a city is privately owned. The city cannot do it alone. This type of work is a community effort, and so a tree planting campaign to increase canopy is important. Possible options include schools, parks, low-income neighborhoods, business districts, parking lots and plazas, and along streets. If you want a tree in your yard, what assistance do you need? In other words, am I elderly, so I need help planting? Am I on a fixed income, so a donated tree would help? I don't know a lot about tree care, but I want to learn and help. And so that's where public feedback is important. So at the end of the presentation and webinar, there'll be a public feedback survey that'll be sent out. It'll also be available on the city's Go Green webpage. It's an anonymous survey. It's about 10 questions and takes 5 to 10 minutes to complete. A summary of those public responses will be shared with the City Commission in July. The City of Boynton Beach has also created a story map. This is where you can explore the data that we just went over and get a closer look at the city's canopy and plantable areas. The link is listed here at gogreenboynton.com. And that is the end of the presentation. We will now be doing a question and answer period with everyone. There are a variety of ways you can ask questions, and I'm going to turn it over to Karen, who's now going to moderate the Q&A.
Okay, thanks very much, Matt. And so we have a couple of ways that you can share your feedback or ask a question. There's a couple of questions that have already appeared that I will share, but you can do this in several ways. One way is to raise your hand. So as a participant, you'll have a little hand icon on your computer, and you can just click that, and that lets me know that you would like to ask a question. The other way you can participate is to type a question in the chat room, or there's also a dashboard for questions, and then we can read your question and answer it aloud. So with that, I will see if there's any burning questions that anybody has. Also input, if you would like to tell the city where you think trees are most needed, or you have other ideas for partners to include in the campaign. This is just the very beginning. This is not the end. So just to be clear for that. So with that, I will see if there's any new questions in the chat room. And I'll give you guys a chance. Not everyone is comfortable with typing into these online meetings. Questions that have come up so far. One of them was, I'll read aloud and I'll let Rebecca answer that one. Will the trees be native to our area?
We definitely prioritize native plantings and aim to include native trees as much as possible. To be clear, the canopy assessment doesn't quite go that far. What we've done is what Matt and Karen just presented is basically coming up with the broad goal of 3,000 trees per year. Now, how we meet that, as Matt briefly described, is a community-wide effort. So we looked, let me just say, Green Infrastructure Center gave us so much value in this project. They gave us tools that I haven't even looked at but haven't fully exhausted. And one of those tools is a budget calculator that we were able to go into and calculate our goal. And that's where we came up with the 3,000, and we could look at the cost based on examples of how much trees cost in different venues in different ways. So some of them will be the city planting them directly. Some of them will be contracting for smaller trees to be planted in schools or public lands, for example. And so some of them, we actually estimate maybe half of what we're paying for as a city would be giving away the trees, because that's a way of getting them out to our residents. And we have success partnering with community greening. We've done 2 tree giveaways, actually 3, two in the last fiscal year with the grant that community greening got from the Community Foundation of Palm Beach and Martin Counties, focused in the heart of Boynton neighborhood. So getting them out to the public is there's a variety of ways. And so that's long-winded answer is that when we do the tree giveaways, we focus entirely on native trees and fruit trees, because we also see trees as a way of increasing food security in lower income neighborhoods. We planted an urban garden, an urban grove this year in Sarah Sims to help meet that too. So we do plant fruit trees, and we encourage native trees. We're also going to be looking at our city codes to tighten them up a bit with the requirements for native plants and trees. And I'll stop talking.
That's fine. A related question, and maybe you've already answered it, is what grants or resources are available to nonprofits who want to add more trees to their property?
Not being a nonprofit, what I know is mostly from our partnership with Community Greening. We do have Community Greening on the line, and I may call on Matt if there's a more specific question, but I'll just say that there's plenty of them. There seems to be both public foundations such as Palm Beach and Martin County Community Foundation, which has given us the grant for Heart of Boynton, as well as private corporations that provide grants. Some of the banks, we actually have an application in with TD Bank to do another park tree planting. I believe there are federal and state grants as well, and you guys, being a nonprofit, would be able to add to that answer, wouldn't you?
Yes, we also recommended the Lines for Community Trees. If you are interested in getting involved with that, it's a consortium of groups through the side of from American Forests, and so we'll send some information out after the webinar about that group. But I have also found that local businesses are often very interested in donating trees to a campaign. So it's a great fundraiser that you could do on Facebook or other ways. So as the city organizes its campaign and gets underway, we'll try to make sure that all those ideas are published so people can find multiple sources for grants. Let's see, the next question is, what are the most beneficial tree species to plant in Southeast Florida?
I would go back to starting with native species as much as possible. We're focusing again on canopies, so we're moving away from palms, although there are some native palms that do provide some benefits, but in terms of the overall benefits of tree canopy, shade, and stormwater in particular, we're moving away from palms. So there's a number of large and small native trees that we can focus on, as well as, again, fruit trees. Do you guys want to add some of the specifics? I know you're not from Florida, but you're experts.
I've been coming to your fair city every year since I was 5, actually, but I will, what I prefer to do is I'll send everyone who attended, I'll send them a link to some good lists for native trees for South Florida, and that will be easier than trying to list them all here. But certainly if you, go ahead.
I'll just add, every time someone asks me that, and I'll do it now too, I refer them to Community Greening, who's our local partner, communitygreening.org, and those guys are really experts on the local ecology and what grows well here and how to care for your trees.
Yes, and someone put in the chat rooms, beneficial native trees include oaks and pines. Oaks soak up a lot of water and provide a lot of habitat for beneficial insects. And pines are also remarkable because they have a high leaf area index, so they actually soak up the most stormwater compared to some trees. Someone said our community was considering planting palm trees in the swales of the city streets. What type of tree would be better and not need a lot of costly trimming and cleanup? Okay. So there are a number of oaks that you could plant that don't mind having their feet wet. But I think, yes, palms would actually create quite a lot of maintenance needs. So as I said, we'll send everyone a link to a native planting guide that's available online following the webinar. All right. Someone said, Will this report be shared with the Planning and Zoning Department and the Commission? I sit on the Planning and Development, I guess, and there's always a lot of pushback from developers regarding palms. They want them. I keep saying no. I hope you share this info with planning so the city staff will intercept all these palms before they are sent to P&D and the City Commission. Would you like to comment on that, Rebecca?
Yeah, that is a great point. We have, throughout this project, we have a city committee, staff committee that includes representatives from our planning and zoning department, engineering, utilities, GIS, and others. And so they know about the study across city departments. And we had not yet scheduled it to go to the P&D board, but that is definitely a good idea and something to look at. So yeah, I'll talk with my colleagues in planning about how to go about doing that, possibly before the city commission meeting or keeping them in the loop at some point. Thank you.
Okay. Yes, and we neglected to mention there is a written report that goes with this project that's being typeset now, and that will be presented to the City Commission in July with a request that they adopt the draft planting goal that was presented today. So there is a written report, and again, all of you who participated in the webinar will receive a link to get a copy of that. Someone wrote, I'm in Boynton, Leisureville, and I would like to plant palms in the swale areas. That is 350 trees, one per, and I think unfortunately this question got cut off a little bit. One per house, I think it might say. So, I mean, you could plant palms in the swale areas. Just keep in mind that they will require a lot of maintenance and will, not soak up as much water. Let's see. The next one is, how do live oak tree species rate for canopy? Live oaks do extremely well. They have a high leaf area index, meaning they capture a lot of water. They have deep root systems, so they also soak up quite a lot of water from the ground and evaporate that back to the air. Somebody said gumbo, limbo, etc. Yes, that is definitely a South Central Florida native tree, and they said great work. Excited to see this get distributed. And then this was a question for Mayor Grant. I'm not sure if he's still on, but it says, what is the status of the Nichols property? That may be one that we have to answer after the presentation. So I will.
I'll make a note of that. If you also want to email me at harveyr@bbfl.us,
Okay.
I can look into it.
And I can send you the name of the person asking that question so you could contact them directly. Okay. Next question. During the stormwater improvement project in the Forest Park neighborhood, residents were told grass and swales absorbed much more water than trees. So trees were removed and are not allowed to be planted. This presentation seems to suggest otherwise. Is staff now on board?
As I said earlier, we have a core committee that has been involved through this project. I can't speak for everyone what's going on in their minds exactly, and I will just say that it is an ongoing process to educate internally our own staff. I do believe our commission is on board. I look forward to presenting to them and having these conversations in the coming months. And this is, like Karen said, really, in a sense, the starting point, not the starting point because we have been planting trees through a lot of partnerships and events, but insofar as making it official policy of the city. So we still have work to do. This resolution that will go along with the tree planting goal of 3,000 trees per year is an initial step to develop that awareness, that buy-in, and build from there. With some of the tools that GIC has given us, we can continue to calculate the stormwater benefits and continue to educate everyone in our government and in our community about the value of trees.
Thank you. Another comment in the chat room is it's really important to encourage homeowners to plant more trees and less lawns. So here. And you don't have to mow them either. And then also community greeting piped up that cypress are a great tree to plant in wet areas, especially in swales. So for that, to answer that question. And then I'm scrolling down. Can the city work with or mandate homeowners association communities to plant native trees? That's a question.
That is a great question. I don't know that we can mandate HOAs, but we can certainly educate them. And that is, I think, where we go from here is part of this rolling out the campaign. Like I said, now this is the report, the science, the data, the maps, and the resolution to commit to the goal. And so where we go from here is to roll out the campaign, and the campaign is educational and awareness to get the community on board. So I definitely see my office going out to HOAs and giving a mini version of this presentation, engaging them and helping to educate.
Great. And then someone else wrote also, are you all suggesting cypress trees for wet areas? I think the short answer is yes. Cypress trees love to have their feet wet, and so they will help to soak up standing water. Someone asked, are you able to post this presentation on Nextdoor along with the survey? Nextdoor being neighborhood sort of online web forums.
The city does use Nextdoor. I will talk to our marketing department about that. I know they posted announcements on some of our social media platforms. We are, as we speak, I think, making this live on the Go Green Boynton site, the story map, and this presentation, once we're done, the link will be on our gogreenboynton.com website, so we can post that on social media such as Nextdoor.
Sure, and everyone who's on the call this evening on the webcast, we will also be sending you a link to the presentation, and you can let your neighbors and friends and colleagues know that they can go to the Go Green website at the city and get this presentation and download it. So that will be posted there. And as we also heard, the survey will be on all week long, so we can continue to get feedback and comments. Are there any plans to keep trees on proposed developing or construction sites? So asking about retaining trees during development so that they're able to provide benefits after the construction is completed.
Sure. So some of you who've been engaged may recall back last fall, I think it was October or something, we passed a Sustainable Development Standards Ordinance that adds to our land development regulations additional points for developers to, they need to meet a certain point threshold, and there's a variety of ways they can meet them. And tree preservation and addition of tree canopy is one of the ways that they can meet them. There's a lot of flexibility in the points. It includes energy and water and urban nature and waste reduction. Again, like I said, the Green Infrastructure Center provided us a codes and ordinance tool, so we're going to be looking at those. I'm getting with our landscape architect and our planning division to look at the existing codes and look at some other municipalities and counties' codes as models to augment them. Currently, we do have a tree preservation ordinance, and there are replacement requirements. If trees do have to come down, they can be replaced. But I might want to look at those again and make them a little more stringent, such as fewer palm trees allowed and what you replace a canopy tree with. And I think that this report and the science behind it that Karen and her team have put into it give us a really good basis on which to make those changes to our practices.
And thank you. Mayor Grant has also texted into the chat room that the discussion for the Nichols property will be held on July 7th at the City Commission meeting. So we're the person who wanted to know that. Okay. Let me scroll down to see if there's any other chats. Do people also get, it says do they, I assume it means developers, do they also get points for removal of invasive non-native trees? So if someone were to develop a property, would they get, because there certainly are some invasive species in Boynton Beach.
Yes, that is a good idea. It's not directly, but there's points for habitat restoration. So that's, I guess, where that would come in. It doesn't refer specifically to removing, but yeah, it's 4 points in the urban nature section for using only native or Florida-friendly plant species restoring pre-development native habitat on the project site. So yes.
Okay. And then another question related to development. Are developers being encouraged to increase the number of trees on their properties, especially at Boynton Center and Renaissance Commons?
I can't speak to those two developments specifically. I guess the question is not as a new development, but existing development. I would need to reach out to my colleagues in the planning department to see about that, or maybe to the planning and development board.
Okay.
All I know is what's in our code is to preserve trees when possible and replace them as appropriate. And then our additional sustainable development point system does give points for adding more canopy trees, but that's for new developments and redevelopments. But Renaissance Commons, and what was the other one? Boynton?
I'm sorry.
Sorry.
I scrolled down to the next question. It's Boynton Center and Renaissance Commons.
Boynton Center. Okay, I will reach out to my colleagues and get back to you on that.
Okay. All right. So as far as I can see, that is all of the questions that I have in the chat room, and I will check for any raised hands on the right. But I believe I've answered all of them. If anyone has not been answered. Oh, here's another raised hand. Updating the city code with a higher % native would go a long way towards providing guidelines for HOAs and new development. That was a suggestion to you. Okay. Just checking for any other raised hands. And for everyone who's still participating, you are certainly welcome again to contact Rebecca with ideas and comments. Matt, if you could click to the next slide just to show everyone contact information.
Yeah, if you think of any questions afterwards, please feel free to email me. It should be up there in a second. My phone number and email, I think, are both on there.
Yes.
Also, if you have just thoughts, comments, if you have stories about favorite trees, I know Karen and her team do this in other communities, and we're sharing some interesting stories about community trees. And not having been in Boynton myself that long, I don't know all of the background. So I welcome any particular stories, because you know how stories can go a long way towards making a case and educating people and moving forward our campaign. I also invite you to look again at communitygreening.org and reaching out to them for volunteer opportunities to get involved. We also have a garden club in the city, Boynton Beach Garden Club, who is active. The Sierra Club, of course, is active in the area and is very interested in the topic as well. So there's many organizations you can get involved in. Did we have any more questions? Karen, I can't hear you. You muted?
I've just unmuted myself.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay. Does anyone else have any other questions? Okay. I'm just checking the chat really quickly. Thank you for your patience. Okay. I don't believe there are any other. Oh, yes. Nope, I've got them. I think we've actually got them all. So one comment from a stormwater environmental engineer, because looks like we paid him to say this, or her. Trees soak up water and provide numerous water quality benefits where water was designed to infiltrate or where they will affect piping that is subsurface. Like all infrastructure, green infrastructure, trees in this case, need to be carefully placed. Great presentation. Thanks for doing this. Happy to live and work in a city that is so proactive with regards to trees. So on that, I think that
What a great note to end on.
that's a great note to end on, I think. We're at 4:55, so I don't see any other chats. So I don't know if you would like to say any other final comments before we end. I will make sure that I believe everyone now can see Rebecca's contact information.
Okay. Yeah, again, go to gogreenboynton.com. As of last time I checked, the survey link is there. The story map may not be there quite yet, but will be very soon. And as soon as we download the video from this presentation, we will put that up there. So refer your friends, anyone who was not able to attend, that we will have that up all week for public input. So share what you learned today. You can always go back and look at the webinar, because I know there was a lot of data and maps in there. And the story map will give you a better idea of, zooming in on particular neighborhoods, what the tree canopy and potential planting areas look like. If that inspires any thoughts, please email me, reach out. I'd love to hear from you. Any thoughts you had about priorities in the city, which areas you think we should focus on the most, any advice you have for making a successful tree planting campaign in our city. And do please take the survey as well.
Okay, thank you, everyone. We'll send you a follow-up email within about 10 minutes so that you'll have all the information you need to share this work, and also hope to take the survey. So again, we're going to end the webinar now, and we thank you very much for your good attention. Have a great evening.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.